It doesn't get more Canadian than this. What's the farthest they would come from?
I don't know. You might have the record. To be honest with you, a lot of the material that comes into our auctions is a result of trips that my brother and other colleagues of ours do across Canada.
Okay,
so a lot of it is picked up. But as far as driving something here, I don't know that anyone's really driven anything.
9 hours is what I did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Probably
Okay.
not that long.
Okay. And you know about these Supertest signs?
Yes, absolutely.
So when, do you know where they were made? By who?
Yes. So the main manufacturer of these dealer signs was a company called P&M, Porcelain and Metal, in Orillia. But there was another manufacturer in, I think it's Cowansville, Quebec, that predated P&M, and they were called Vilas or Vilas. And they made all of the porcelain enamel signs for the Canadian market. So those were the two big Canadian porcelain sign makers. There were other ones, but they were a little bit earlier than those two. And a lot of times, if you look closely, you can find the maker's mark on these signs. Not always, but sometimes. So take a look at the other side to see if it's there. It would say P&M Orillia, but it doesn't look like this one is marked. It's usually really faint, and it would be along the edge here. But Scott might be able to, on the other sign that we have, that other Supertest sign over there, that's the same as this one, right? Is that one marked? You can check on the spreadsheet.
Yeah.
I can show you an example of another sign that has the marking, but it's unquestionable that it would have been made by P&M Orillia. Just given the age of this sign, this would date to the early 1940s.
And when they made enamel signs, they actually put the powder on somehow?
Yeah, so they
bake it.
They baked it. So they baked individual colors on, and then they'd have to refire it for every different color. So generally speaking, porcelain signs that have multiple colors are always more desirable because they look better, but also because they were a lot more costly to produce in the factory.
Well, that's one.
If you rub your fingers across the porcelain, you can feel the difference in they call it shelving, where the one color starts and the other one. This one doesn't have a really big shelving. Maybe you can feel it the most in the black letters, but that's because they're fired on at different times.
And do collectors know all about that? And please describe your collectors of signs like this. What would the person do with it?
Yeah, so collectors like this specific size of sign. This is a 5-footer, I believe. And there are 5-foot round porcelain signs made for basically every single gas station from this period. So they look really, really good together because they're all the same size. So a lot of times if you were to go to a collector's, man cave or whatever you want to call it, they'd have these signs suspended one after the other from the ceiling. Obviously, you'd want to display this in a place where you can see both sides to get the maximum bang for the buck. But
outside too, people put them?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, just like you had it outside, as long as it's not in direct
sun,
weather elements or whatever, the sign will look the same way. And sun, that's right too. So the big thing specifically with this, as I get off track a little bit, but the big thing with these signs is oftentimes the surface got really chalky as a result of just being out in the rain. So the fact that you had it sheltered there has kept it nice and glossy like this. People dig these signs out of the ground from 100 years ago, and they come out looking just like this, which is unbelievable. But that just sort of speaks for how things were made at that time.
Well, that's amazing. So what's the real attraction of a sign like this? Like, especially the Supertest one, because of it's a maple leaf, obviously, but who is this going to be an American, a Canadian, or anywhere?
So with Supertest, you're just as likely to find an American buyer as you are a Canadian one. And the reality is, the Americans love our signs because of the quality of the porcelain here was actually a lot better than the American manufacturers, believe it or not. But they like, in the US, which is where a lot of the main collections are, the major collections, they love our Canadian signs because they just don't see them. And the Supertest is just like for them to have a Canadian sign that has a maple leaf and you know it's just everything Canadian. It says Canada's all Canadian company on it. It's like it's the dealer sign to have as far as a Canadian dealer sign goes.
Lucky for me.
That's right.
So what's your hope and dream? Will you be auctioning this yourself?
So either my brother or I, we take turns on the mic. So when it comes across the block, I would love to have the pleasure of being able to sell this one. It's one of the nicer ones that we've been able to handle. We've sold a number of them, but as far as the damages go, there's nothing massive, nothing over the size of what I would say a dime would be. And when you stand back with a sign of this size, none of these are what I would consider to be offensive at all. And the other thing too is that you might take it for granted, but the reality is the sign's in its original ring, which is a big deal because they often get separated from that ring, and when they do, they're more susceptible to be damaged.
Okay.
Over there of one that I think fell out of its ring or something like that, and has a fairly big impact as a result of that.
Okay, so my family has been voting on Facebook on the value of this sign based on looking at your previous sales.
Yep.
They hit $12,000.
It's funny, if you would have just asked me right there, what do you think this sign is going to sell for? And I often, like, until you get to actually put your hands on it, you can't, it's hard to really nail a value just by photographs. So in this case, looking at it, the big thing I like about it is that the porcelain has not gone chalky. And when it loses that gloss, you're talking about a completely different animal. This is a very nice, consistently glossy sign. It's the slightly earlier version. They have a later version of this sign that doesn't have the green detail here, so that would date to more into the 1950s. Those are still very, very popular, but they're not quite as collectible as this version. It wouldn't surprise me if this sign brought 15,000, but I certainly don't see it selling for less than 10.
Okay, so what year was this made?
So I don't know the exact year, but this logo and everything that you see here would be like early 1940s. Yep. And there is an earlier version of this with slightly more detail in the leaf and a little bit. It's a smaller size, but that sign would date to the 1930s. This version is 1940s, and then there's a later version with no green on the outside of the leaf and very little detail, and that would be in the 1950s and 60s.
Awesome. Well,
it's too bad there's not a maker's mark. It doesn't change the value at all, but
it could have been made in Cowansville.
Well, absolutely. It could have been. I tend to think that it probably was made by P&M, but I'd have to look back at other versions that we've sold because the makers didn't mark every single sign they put out, and sometimes the mark's so faded that it's just difficult to see. But no, I mean, and we'll be able to clean this up a little bit. I don't know if you've done anything to it, but like for instance, this will come out, these two rusty areas. So by the time it gets to our photographer, it's going to look as good as it possibly can. It's definitely a nice example. And collectors know that these signs were susceptible to that surface haze, that etching that happens, and to find one that has nice uniform equal gloss across the whole thing is kind of it's a real treat. This scratch here might even come out too. It probably will. But
yeah, the other side's just as nice.
Yeah, I was gonna say that it's normally you find these and they just have one big hit from somebody throwing a big rock at them or something like that. These are what I would suspect were probably the result of either BB gun or like shotgun.
Yeah.
Somebody took one shot at it, but. Again, none of these porcelain losses are big enough to really, offend anybody. Now we actually we're the sole representatives for the authentication company that's TAC, and we grade and authenticate signs in Canada. Dan Matthews started that company in the U.S., but we're actually going through the process of packing and grading signs right now. So I'm going to be applying a small sticker to show that this sign is an authentic and original sign, and I'll also be giving each side a grade. And I don't want to and like we can't really give it a grade until I've completely cleaned the whole thing, but my take is that it's probably going to be somewhere in the 8.5 to 8.75, which is very, very good grade for such a sign. In order to get into the 9s, you basically have to have no hits or anything in the main field of the sign. But this is like, to have a one like this with minimal wear on each side is a pleasure.
Okay, I finished.
Yeah, it's cool that you kept it for so long, you know?
Yeah. There's a story there I'm gonna tell you someday.